Security should have stopped her. She doesn't belong here. The remark came from a woman dripping in diamonds, her smile sharp as glass. But when the crowd turned, all they saw was poise, power, presence. The ex they'd erased walking toward the man who'd built his empire on forgetting her. And in her arms, his legacy, alive and undeniable. Stay with us, because what began as mockery ended as justice. He tried to rewrite history, but the woman he erased came back holding the truth in her arms. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Have you ever been dismissed until your presence became undeniable? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Black Stories Untold with Love, and ring that notification bell for more heartwarming stories that celebrate strength. The chandeliers of the St. Clair Hotel shimmer like 1,000 captured stars, their glow spilling over silk gowns and polished marble. Every surface gleams, every breath seems rehearsed. The air carries the mingled scent of lilies and champagne, that quiet perfume of privilege. Guests lean close to whisper, their voices low and admiring, as Charles Brown stands at the altar with a composure that looks effortless but feels like armor. His tuxedo fits like it was made for a man born into power. His smile is practiced, camera perfect, the kind that convinces even those who know better that he has everything he ever wanted. Across from him, Camille Harrington glows beneath the soft light. Her white gown flows like liquid, her diamond necklace catching the sparkle of every flash. She embodies perfection in the way society defines it. Poised, delicate, untouchable. Her hand rests lightly in his, and together they look like a magazine cover brought to life. Behind the photographer's lenses, the image will last forever, even if the truth beneath it cannot. The minister speaks, his voice echoing faintly through the grand hall. Each word feels heavy, ceremonial, yet far away. Charles nods at the right moments, repeating vows with smooth certainty. His jaw remains firm, his expression unflinching, but somewhere deep behind his polished facade, something shifts. It happens in the smallest way, the way his eyes flicker for half a second when the words forever and love pass between them, the way his throat tightens when the orchestra swells. In that instant, a memory surfaces. The laughter of another woman, warm and unguarded. The way she once touched his face as if seeing the man behind the ambition. Blair. Her name drifts through his mind like smoke, uninvited and unstoppable. He blinks once and forces the thought away. Not now, not here. The cameras flash again, saving him. Applause rises from the crowd, and the moment is buried under the weight of perfection. Rows of guests stand as the ceremony ends. Crystal glasses are raised in celebration. The music swells again, smooth and elegant, like a soundtrack chosen for a life that looks complete. Camille squeezes his hand and smiles up at him, a gesture meant for the crowd, not for him. Her beauty is impossible to ignore, but her gaze holds calculation, not affection. She knows the cameras are still on them. She knows the world is watching. Charles lifts his chin slightly, his smile widening, every movement deliberate. The St. Clair ballroom becomes a stage, and he plays his part flawlessly. He knows what they see: success, legacy, power, redemption. The perfect man who rose from nothing to marry into everything. But beneath the applause, beneath the glitter and the noise, another truth hums quietly in his chest, a pulse that refuses to fade. The violinists glide into a softer melody as guests begin to move toward the reception hall. The marble floor reflects the lights above, a shimmering ocean of gold and white. Charles walks beside Camille, nodding to guests. thanking them for coming, his laughter polite and hollow. For a moment, he catches his own reflection in the glass doors leading to the terrace. The smile he sees there does not reach his eyes. Behind him, the ballroom glows like paradise, but in his mind, another image flickers. Blair standing in the rain years ago, eyes bright with defiance, whispering that love without truth is just performance. He had turned away then, chasing a future that looked cleaner. Yet even surrounded by grandeur, her voice lingers like an echo that refuses to die. The reception begins with flawless precision. The St. Clair ballroom glitters under candlelight, gold reflected in glass and crystal, elegance layered upon extravagance. Laughter floats through the air like perfume, rich and artificial. The orchestra shifts to a brighter melody, and guests fill the dance floor in a blur of satin and tuxedos. Every detail, from the towering white roses to the chilled champagne, has been designed to impress. Yet amid the perfection, Charles feels something fraying inside him, a quiet unraveling that no one else can see. Camille glides through the room, her gown trailing behind her like mist. She stops often, accepting congratulations with the polished warmth of someone who has rehearsed every smile. Her laughter rings clear, delicate, but practiced. Charles watches her move, watches the guests orbit around her as though drawn by her beauty and lineage. She was born into this world. He had clawed his way into it. And even now, surrounded by admiration, he feels like an actor caught between takes, unsure which version of himself he is supposed to be. His best man, Lucas, raises a glass and leans in, voice low enough to sound conspiratorial, yet loud enough for others to hear. He says that Charles has outdone himself, that some men spend years learning not to repeat their mistakes, but Charles had simply traded up. Laughter follows, polite and sharp, carrying the sting of truth dressed as humor. Camille smiles, unaware of the wound those words open. Or perhaps she is aware and chooses to ignore it, because ignoring is easier than asking questions. Charles forces a laugh that dies before it reaches his eyes. He tells himself it's just a joke, just banter among men who measure worth in wins and women. But the echo of that phrase repeats inside him, growing heavier each time. Traded up. It's what people said when they believed ambition was cleaner than love. The orchestra swells, and for a moment, the music drowns everything else. Yet in that sound, he hears something else, her voice, soft and unguarded, calling his name the night he left. Blair had been the only person who ever looked at him without calculation. She believed in his dreams before they were anything more than promises whispered in the dark. Her laughter still drifts through his mind, effortless and warm, cutting through the chill of the ballroom. He remembers the small apartment they once shared, the peeling wallpaper, the coffee they drank from chipped mugs, the plans they made for a life built on something real. He swallows the memory, but it stays lodged in his throat. Around him, the crowd cheers as Camille begins the first dance, her gown catching the light like spun sugar. She motions for him to join her. The cameras lift, the music slows. Charles takes her hand and steps into the spotlight. Every movement is perfect, every smile timed to the rhythm of expectation. The applause swells again, and to everyone watching, he looks like a man who has everything. Yet as the waltz carries them across the marble floor, his mind slips away again, to the only woman who ever saw him without the mask. And as Camille rests her head against his chest, he realizes he can no longer tell whether the applause he hears belongs to the life he has built or to the ghost of the one he destroyed. The applause fades as Charles stands at the center of the room, the microphone gleaming in his hand. The chandeliers above him throw golden light across his face, softening every edge, turning him into the image of triumph that everyone came to celebrate. Behind him, the orchestra waits in perfect stillness, the quiet hum of expectation filling the air. The scent of roses and champagne lingers, the perfume of luxury that masks the hollowness underneath. He begins the way he always does, smooth and confident, his voice wrapping the crowd in easy charm. He thanks his parents for their guidance, his friends for their loyalty, his bride for her grace. Each word lands exactly where it should, rehearsed and polished until sincerity itself becomes a performance. The audience smiles and nods. They see a man at the height of his success, not the cracks forming just beneath the surface. Camille watches him with pride, her hands clasped in front of her, the diamond on her finger catching the light. She believes this speech is for her, a declaration of love wrapped in golden phrasing. To the room, he is eloquence made flesh, the perfect husband speaking of devotion and destiny. Yet as he talks, something in his voice shifts. It's subtle at first, a glimmer of arrogance where warmth should be. Then, as the crowd laughs a little too eagerly, he leans into it. He tells them how life has a way of testing a man, how success requires leaving behind what no longer fits. He chuckles as he speaks of lessons learned, of how some mistakes are better left forgotten. The words sound harmless enough to those who do not know, but there is a shadow threaded through them, a name buried in the cadence, a memory wrapped in mockery. Blair. The laughter that follows is polite, indulgent, but sharp. Each chuckle feels like glass breaking quietly somewhere inside him. He forces a smile, knowing he cannot take it back now. Pride has its own momentum, and the crowd loves confidence more than confession. The more they laugh, the deeper he goes, turning old tenderness into entertainment. The truth, once sacred, becomes a prop. Camille laughs too, radiant and unaware, believing his every word to be another affirmation of their future. She touches his arm with affection that feels almost staged, a gesture meant for the cameras, not for him. The flash of lenses blinds him for a moment, and when his vision clears, he catches his reflection in the mirrored wall behind the guests. For a fleeting second, he sees a man he does not recognize. Beyond the marble doors, the night hums with the quiet rhythm of the city. Somewhere outside, footsteps pause. A voice he thought he would never hear again listens through the open archway. Blair stands in the shadowed hall, her heart still for one suspended breath as his laughter carries through the air. Her name lies buried inside his joke, disguised but unmistakable. Inside, the guests raise their glasses in delight. Charles raises his too, but his hand trembles slightly. The applause swells, filling the ballroom with noise that feels both deafening and empty. For a moment, he thinks he feels eyes on him from beyond the light, a presence just out of view. He dismisses it, forcing another smile as he concludes the toast. The crowd sees a man basking in adoration. He feels only the echo of a voice from his past, whispering the one thing success could never silence. The doors of the St. Clair ballroom swing open with a sound that slices through the laughter. The music halts mid-measure, the violinists bow suspended in the air. Heads turn in a slow, rippling motion, the crowd's attention pulled toward the entrance as if drawn by an unseen force. For a moment, no one speaks. The chandeliers catch the newcomer in their golden glow, and the scene shifts from celebration to spectacle. Blair Lewis stands in the doorway, her figure outlined by the light from the hall. The navy fabric of her gown glides around her with quiet authority, understated yet commanding. Her skin glows like burnished mahogany beneath the crystal light, her posture tall, unflinching. In her arms, a little girl clings to her shoulder, her curls tumbling down in dark, soft waves. The child's wide eyes sweep the room, and in their familiar shade of amber, the truth lands harder than any word could. The sound begins as a whisper. Gasps ripple through the guests, layered with disbelief and curiosity. The perfect illusion of the evening fractures. Conversations die mid-sentence. Camille Harrington stands frozen near the head table, her smile dissolving into something brittle. Her eyes dart toward Charles, searching for an explanation that refuses to come. Charles cannot move. His breath catches, his mind blank. The blood drains from his face as if the light itself has turned on him. For years he had buried this truth beneath success, beneath silence, beneath the life he built to look untouchable. Yet here it stands, tangible and innocent, wearing his own eyes. Blair does not flinch beneath the weight of the stairs. Each step she takes across the marble floor is slow, deliberate, as if she owns every echo. Her heels click softly, the sound resonating like a heartbeat in the stillness. The child in her arms shifts, resting her head against Blair's shoulder, and the simple gesture disarms the room more than any accusation could. Camille recovers first, her expression tightening into composure born of habit. She lifts her chin slightly, forcing a brittle smile. Guests glance at her, waiting for a cue on how to react, but her silence speaks louder than words. Charles feels her gaze burning into him, demanding an explanation he cannot give. His mouth opens, but no sound comes. Blair stops a few feet away, close enough for him to see the steadiness in her eyes. There is no anger there, no triumph, only truth, the kind of truth that exists beyond apology. Her presence alone unmakes the story he has told about himself. Around them, whispers bloom like wildfire. Names, questions, fragments of disbelief twist through the air. The child looks up, curious, her gaze landing on the man who cannot look away. The resemblance is undeniable. The same eyes, the same curve of a smile that once came from love, not guilt. Camille sees it too, and something inside her hardens. The silence stretches until it feels physical. Then Blair speaks, her voice calm and clear, carrying across the room without strain. Every word lands softly, yet with precision. Each syllable a reminder that truth does not need volume to be heard. Charles feels the weight of every eye in the room shift to him, waiting. The mask that has carried him this far begins to crumble. And for the first time that night, the man who built his empire on control stands powerless beneath the quiet strength of the woman he once abandoned. The laughter fades just as the double doors open. A hush moves through the St. Clair ballroom like a wave breaking. The violins falter, silverware stops midair. Every head turns toward the entrance where the light from the corridor spills across the marble floor. It catches the hem of a navy gown and climbs slowly upward until it finds Blair Lewis standing framed in gold. She does not rush. Her stillness commands the room more completely than any announcement could. The gown skims her figure, simple and elegant, the color deep enough to drink the light. Her skin glows against it, smooth and warm, and in her arms, a little girl clings to her shoulder, curls tumbling down like ink against silk. The child's eyes sweep the room, wide and steady, and in their unmistakable amber hue the truth blooms like thunder. The whispers begin at the edges of the crowd. A ripple of disbelief, a question half-formed and bitten back. Camille Harrington stands frozen near the dais, her painted smile unraveling one heartbeat at a time. The band lowers their instruments. The chandeliers seem too bright, every sparkle suddenly cruel in its clarity. Charles Brown feels the world tilt beneath him. The wine in his glass quivers. His throat dries, his chest tightens. He knows before anyone speaks that every eye is measuring the resemblance, calculating the years, piecing together the story he worked so hard to bury. The child looks at him with the same gaze that once met him across a narrow kitchen table, filled with belief he never deserved. Blair walks forward, the sound of her heels crisp against the marble. Her expression does not waver. There is no anger, no plea, only calm that feels heavier than accusation. Each step is deliberate, and the space between them collapses until he can smell the faint trace of jasmine from her skin. The same scent that haunted him through every empty victory. Camille turns toward him, eyes sharp and searching. The silence between them is merciless. He opens his mouth, but nothing comes out. The crowd waits for an explanation that does not exist. Blair stops a few paces away and shifts the child slightly, the movement protective, graceful. The girl nestles closer, her small hand gripping the fabric of her mother's gown. The whispers swell into a low murmur, a current of shock and fascination that fills every corner of the ballroom. Charles hears his name scattered among them, distorted by disbelief. He cannot move. He feels the mask of composure slide from his face, leaving only a man stripped of defense. Blair meets his eyes. For a heartbeat, the noise fades, the room dissolves. He sees the woman he left standing in the rain, the life he turned away from, the love he turned into silence. She holds his gaze for a moment longer, then glances down at the child who bears his reflection. The room breathes again, but nothing is the same. The perfection he built has cracked, and through that opening walks the one truth he can no longer escape. The murmurs swell until they feel like a pulse beneath the chandeliers. The guests lean in, faces lit with the feverish curiosity that only scandal can bring. Blair stands at the center of it all, a pillar of stillness amid the storm. Her arm tightens slightly around the little girl who now peers at the glittering room with the wide-eyed wonder of innocence. The moment stretches, fragile and electric. Then Blair's voice cuts through the noise, quiet but commanding, each word woven with control. She introduces the child in her arms as Aria. The name settles over the crowd like a confession. For a second, the room does not breathe. Then the realization ripples through it, unstoppable, spreading from table to table, whispered behind manicured hands. Charles feels the sound like a tide rising around him. Aria, the word is both a name and a reckoning. He remembers saying it once, years ago in the dark, when Blair first told him she was pregnant. It had been a name filled with hope then. Now it feels like the weight of everything he ran from. Blair's expression remains composed, her tone even. She doesn't raise her voice or plead her case. She does not need to. Her presence speaks louder than any accusation could. She tells them that Aria has come to meet her father, the man who taught the world about success, but forgot what love looked like when no one was watching. Her eyes never leave Charles as she says it, but there is no venom in her gaze. Only truth, cool and sharp, stripped of performance. Camille's hand trembles against her champagne glass, the crystal catching the light as if mocking her. She looks at Charles with a kind of disbelief that borders on betrayal. The silence between them screams louder than the whispers circling the room. Around them, the elegance of the evening begins to unravel. A waiter hesitates mid-step, uncertain whether to serve or retreat. The orchestra lowers their instruments completely. Every sound seems too loud, too real. Charles's chest feels tight, his throat dry. He wants to speak, to explain, to pull the night back under control. But the words that once came so easily have abandoned him. He looks at the little girl again, at the shape of her face, the familiar curve of her smile. His heart clenches with something he cannot name, something he has not allowed himself to feel in years. Blair shifts slightly, her posture calm, her voice softer now. She says she did not come to shame him. She came so that their daughter could know the truth, so that the lies built on silence would no longer define the story of their lives. Her words fall into the hush like stones into water, rippling outward until even the most skeptical guests lower their gaze. For a long moment, no one moves. Then Aria reaches toward Charles with the unguarded curiosity only a child possesses. Her fingers brush the air between them, waiting for him to reach back. He hesitates, frozen between the man he pretends to be and the father he never became. The ballroom that once celebrated him now feels suffocating, the applause replaced by judgment. And in that unbearable stillness, Charles realizes that the truth he tried to bury has finally learned to walk. Charles clears his throat, but the sound cracks in the silence. He steps forward, his hand trembling just enough to betray him. Words gather on his tongue, but they taste wrong, rehearsed, hollow. He has built his life on speeches that moved investors and softened journalists. But here, under the chandelier's golden glare, every sentence collapses before it leaves his mouth. The audience that once hung on his every word now stares at him with the fascination reserved for a man watching his own empire crumble. Blair's gaze never wavers. She stands beneath the same light that flatters everyone else, but on her it feels like truth itself has chosen a place to stand. When she speaks, her voice is gentle, almost tender, but each word lands with precision. She tells him that she believed in him long before he wore this suit, before the press called him brilliant, before the world knew his name. She remembers the man who worked through the night, chasing a dream he swore would change their lives, the man who said love was his anchor. Her eyes soften for a heartbeat, just long enough for everyone to glimpse what once existed between them. Then her voice steadies again. She says that love is not about building kingdoms of glass, but about staying when the lights go out. That success without integrity is nothing more than applause in an empty room. The words are not sharp, but they strike harder than cruelty ever could. The guests shift in their seats, fidgeting with napkins, pretending to sip champagne they can no longer swallow. The discomfort moves through the crowd like a current, sparking whispers that die as quickly as they begin. Some glance toward the doors, wondering if it would be more polite to leave than to witness a man being undone. Others cannot look away. Camille stands beside the head table, frozen in her perfect gown, her face drained of color. She looks at Blair not with anger, but with a dawning recognition of the truth she has just stepped into. Her hand lowers slowly from her necklace, the gesture small yet final. The realization settles over her like dust on marble. She has been living in a story already written. Charles lowers his head, his voice barely more than breath. He says he was young, that he made choices he thought were necessary. But even as he speaks, the excuses sound feeble, each one falling flat against the weight of her composure. Blair does not interrupt. She lets him speak, lets the silence afterward expose how little his words can hold. She looks around the room, her gaze sweeping across the glittering guests who now sit motionless beneath the chandelier. She tells them she is not here for pity or revenge. She came because truth deserves to stand where lies once stood. Her voice softens again, carrying the quiet strength of someone who has already forgiven what others would still hate. The orchestra remains silent. The chandeliers hum faintly overhead. Charles meets her eyes one last time and feels something break, something pride cannot repair. For the first time in years, he understands what success has cost him. The room feels smaller now, the light colder, and as Blair turns toward the doors, every guest in the St. Clair ballroom knows they have just witnessed the end of a man who once thought he had everything. Camille's hand slips from the edge of the table, the crystal glass she was holding tipping over and spilling champagne across the silk cloth. The sound, small and sharp, cuts through the murmuring crowd. She stands motionless for a breath, her gaze locked on Charles as if he is a stranger she has only just met. The chandelier above her flickers slightly, its golden light catching on her tears before she blinks them away. The murmur around them swells into a low, restless hum. Her voice comes out unsteady at first, almost a whisper, but the tremor in it draws more attention than a shout ever could. She asks him if it's true, if this child, the one with his eyes, really belongs to him. The question hangs between them like smoke, impossible to escape. Charles tries to answer, his mouth opening then closing again, his hands useless at his sides. The silence stretches until it becomes unbearable. Camille's composure begins to crack in front of everyone. The woman who has built her life around elegance and control now trembles, her mask slipping one fragment at a time. She takes a step back, shaking her head slowly, her breath coming unevenly. Every whisper feels like a blade drawn too close. The crowd's fascination feeds on her pain, yet no one dares to intervene. They watch, transfixed, waiting for a reaction that will make the scene complete. Charles reaches for her hand, but she recoils before he can touch her. The gesture is instinctive, fierce. Her voice rises now, clear enough to echo against the marble walls. She calls him a liar, a coward, a man who built his empire on charm and deceit. The guests shift uncomfortably in their seats, eyes darting between them like spectators at a play that has become too real. Camille's words cut through the air, her fury unraveling years of practiced poise. Blair stands still, her expression unreadable. She does not gloat or interfere. Her arm remains around Arya, protective but calm, as if she has already stepped beyond the chaos. The contrast between her stillness and Camille's collapse only deepens the spectacle. Camille turns toward her, her lips parting as if to hurl something cruel, but the words falter. The sight of Blair's child, small and innocent, stops her. Whatever accusation she had dies on her tongue. The silence that follows feels heavier than the shouting that came before it. Camille's breath catches, and she presses a trembling hand against her chest as though trying to steady her heart. Charles tries again to speak, his voice breaking as he whispers her name, but she shakes her head, tears spilling freely now. The wedding she spent months perfecting has turned into a requiem for her dignity. Guests begin to move quietly, rising from their seats, their movements careful and hesitant. The orchestra does not resume. The chandeliers glow softly, indifferent to the ruin below. Camille lifts her chin, summoning the last fragments of her pride, and walks toward the exit. Her heels click across the marble in a rhythm that echoes finality. When the doors close behind her, the silence she leaves behind is absolute. It settles over Charles like judgment, leaving him alone beneath the golden light that no longer flatters but exposes. The last of Camille's footsteps fades beyond the doors, leaving only the hollow quiet of the ballroom. The guests remain seated, caught between discomfort and curiosity, their gazes flickering between Blair and Charles as though afraid to look away. The chandeliers glow above them, no longer radiant but harsh, exposing everything the night had tried to conceal. Charles stands frozen near the head table, the weight of every eye pressing down on him. The air feels heavy, thick with the scent of wilted flowers and champagne gone warm. Blair steps forward, her movements unhurried, her posture steady. The child in her arms shifts slightly, then nestles against her shoulder. When she speaks, her voice is calm, not raised to command attention, but strong enough that the room bends toward her. She tells them about the night he left, how he packed his ambition into a single suitcase and walked out the door without looking back. She tells them how she waited for a call that never came, how months passed and silence became her only answer. Her tone does not accuse, it simply reveals. She speaks of the night she realized she was pregnant and how fear became both a companion and a teacher. She worked, she endured, she learned to smile even when her heart felt hollow. Her voice trembles only once when she tells them about the questions Arya began to ask. Questions about a father she had never met, about pictures that showed only her mother. The sound of it breaks something open in the room. A few guests glance down at their plates, ashamed of their fascination. Charles cannot look at her. Every word lands with surgical precision, peeling away the layers of pretense he spent years perfecting. He hears her speak of forgiveness, not as mercy, but as liberation. She says she forgave him long before this night, because she refused to let bitterness raise their child. The words are gentle, but they crush him more completely than anger ever could. The crowd sits in absolute silence, the kind that vibrates with the pulse of truth. The men who once admired Charles avert their eyes. The women study Blair, some with pity, others with quiet awe. Even the reporters, usually quick to document spectacle, lower their cameras as if ashamed to immortalize this moment. Charles finally looks up. His eyes meet Blair's, and in that instant, the distance between them feels infinite. He wants to speak, to apologize, but every sentence he could offer feels too small. The man who once controlled rooms with charm now finds himself voiceless, stripped bare of everything except regret. The truth, once buried under success and reputation, now stands beside him in flesh and blood. Blair presses a kiss to her daughter's hair, her gaze never leaving him. There is no triumph in her face, only the quiet sorrow of someone who once loved deeply and learned to survive its absence. She turns slightly, as if preparing to leave, her calm filling the space where his authority used to live. Charles remains rooted where he stands, surrounded by the ruins of his own image, realizing at last that the most dangerous truth is the one spoken softly. The music never starts again. The band waits for direction that never comes, instruments resting limp in their hands. One by one, guests begin to drift toward the doors, their footsteps hushed, their conversations reduced to whispers. The grandeur of the St. Clair ballroom now feels like a stage after the curtain has dropped, its beauty hollowed out by the weight of what it just witnessed. No one dares meet Charles's eyes as they pass. They look through him, around him, anywhere but at the man who once commanded admiration with a single smile. Outside, the faint murmur of reporters filters through the glass. Camera flashes bloom in the distance like silent lightning. The story has already left the room, racing through headlines, whispered into phones, painted in scandal before the night is even over. Camille has vanished, her family guiding her swiftly toward the waiting car. The sound of the doors closing echoes through the hall, final and sharp. Charles remains at the center of the ballroom, still dressed in perfection that now feels like a disguise. The chandelier above him glows cold, its light no longer golden but white and harsh. He stares up at it, remembering how proud he once felt when the hotel manager told him it had been imported from Vienna, each crystal hand-cut. It had seemed like a symbol then, a testament to how far he had come. Now it only reflects the emptiness of everything he gained. A half-empty glass of champagne sits abandoned on the table beside him. He picks it up slowly, staring into the pale fizz. The distorted reflection staring back at him looks older, tired, and unfamiliar. The confident tilt of his posture is gone, replaced by something smaller, almost fragile. He wonders when he began mistaking admiration for love, applause for purpose. The success he once clung to feels distant, stripped of meaning. In the silence, his memories intrude without mercy. Blair's laughter in the tiny apartment they once shared, the way she used to rest her head on his shoulder while he spoke about a future they would build together. He can still hear her saying that love without honesty would eventually collapse under its own weight. He had smiled then, too certain of himself to understand. Now her words echo against the hollow walls of his triumph. A waiter approaches hesitantly, unsure whether to clear the table or offer sympathy. Charles waves him away without speaking. The man nods and retreats quickly, grateful to escape the gravity of a fallen king. The few remaining guests murmur their polite goodnights, each departure another reminder of the isolation closing in around him. He glances toward the doors where Blair stood moments ago, but the corridor is empty now. The space she occupied feels sacred, as though truth itself had passed through and left a mark. The ballroom, once filled with light and music, feels colder than ever. The chandelier hums faintly above him, casting fractured reflections across the marble floor. Charles sets the glass down and exhales slowly, the sound breaking the quiet. For the first time in years, there is no one left to perform for. No boardrooms, no investors, no adoring crowd, only the man he has become and the ruin of the story he tried to write. The empire still stands, but the man who built it is gone, swallowed by the silence he created. The night air outside the St. Clair feels colder than it should. The noise from the ballroom fades into a distant hum, swallowed by the city. Blair kneels on the edge of the pavement, her gown pooling around her as she fastens Arya's seatbelt. The little girl blinks sleepily, unaware of the storm she has just wandered through. Street lights wash them in soft amber, a gentler glow than the chandeliers inside. For the first time that evening, Blair breathes without the weight of 100 eyes. Behind her, the door opens. The sound of polished shoes on marble echoes faintly before falling quiet. Charles steps into the night, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled, the veneer of perfection gone. He hesitates, watching her for a moment before finding the courage to move closer. His voice comes out low, roughened by exhaustion and something that might be regret. He tells her he needs a chance, not to repair the past, but simply to see them, to be near them, to know something of what he lost. Blair straightens slowly, her movements calm, deliberate. The city hums around them, cars passing, a siren in the distance, the faint rhythm of life continuing as if this night means nothing to it. She studies him for a long moment, and for a heartbeat, the man standing before her looks like the one she once knew. The same eyes, but emptier now. The same voice, but softer. The silence stretches until the world seems to hold its breath. When she finally speaks, her tone is neither cruel nor kind. It is simply true. She tells him he already had everything that mattered, and he let it go. The words fall between them like a final chord, closing the distance that apology cannot cross. There is no anger left in her, only clarity. She turns to open the car door and slides into the driver's seat. Her hand lingers on the steering wheel as if imprinting this moment before it dissolves into memory. Charles takes a step forward, his throat tight, but no words come. The tail lights flare red as the car pulls away, casting a glow across his face. Blair does not look back. The car disappears into the curve of the street, swallowed by the dark, and the silence that follows feels vast and absolute. He stands there for a long time, the cold creeping through his suit, the scent of rain in the air. Behind him, the St. Clair looms, its grand facade now just another building filled with ghosts. Through the tall windows, he can still see the remnants of the night. Empty tables, overturned glasses, petals scattered like confetti that no one stayed to throw. The city moves on. A breeze rustles through the trees lining the street, lifting the corner of a discarded program from the wedding that never truly happened. Charles bends to pick it up, staring at his own name printed in gold. The letters blur as his eyes sting, and he lets it fall back to the ground. The ballroom lights flicker and fade behind him until only the faintest reflection remains in the glass doors. He turns once toward where Blair's car vanished, the sound of her words still echoing in his chest. Then he lowers his head and walks away, the groom who gained the world and lost the only part of it that was ever real. If this story moved you, share it, because somewhere, someone has been laughed at, overlooked, or left behind, and needs to remember that dignity speaks louder than revenge, that walking in with truth is its own kind of power, Have you ever been the one they counted out, only to return stronger, graceful, unbothered, and undeniable? Drop your story in the comments. Let the world see that silence isn't surrender, it's preparation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.